Anna Campbell and Darcy Shack. Wow, what a great conversation. Boy, did I love this. They're food scientists in New Zealand. Darcy has an incredible story of suffering. I don't want to give too much away, but he's an autoimmune disease and what he had to do with it. And they've made this corporation that makes some really great remedies. And we talk about, again, talking about fitness and health, obesity at 75% obesity and overweight in the United States, and almost 75%, and what to do and how to make that change. And we talk about, some of the remedies. We talk about vegetarianism. We talk about intermittent fasting. We talk about, eating the rainbow and making those changes. What we need to do, what they did, how they turned themselves around. It's a fascinating discussion on, how inflammation is just a killer, right? It's the cause, the root of a lot of bad things that happen in the body, and quercetin, how that's so important. You'll be very interested to find out where it's most abundant, by the way, in which food. A very common food. I use it quite often in Italian cooking. One of my favorites, actually. I'll start to use it more now. But great conversation with Anna and Darcy out of New Zealand about food, about supplements. I really enjoyed this conversation. I hope to continue. I hope to continue to talk to them more and eventually meet them face to face. You're going to enjoy this. You really are. Thanks for listening. Hi, I'm Joey Pins. People ask me, how did I lose 130 pounds? The quick answer is always discipline. I started my business, wasn't paying attention to my health, was eating too much, drinking too much sweets. My daughter was born. Next thing I know, I'm pre-diabetic. I have hypertension. I knew something had to change. Discipline. I, like many of you, have faced many challenges in your career, in your family, in your life, in your faith. How did you attack them? How did you approach them? How did you solve them, hopefully? It all had to have some degree of discipline. I'm also asked, how did you found and start a tech business? And it lasted over 25 years. Discipline. I was committed to it, enjoyed technology, didn't enjoy some aspects of it, but knew it was necessary. Discipline. Our podcast mission: how do we use discipline to better ourselves and society? Join me, please, as I talk to interesting people and discuss how they use discipline in their family and their passion and their careers and how it helped them. Our podcast vision: growth through learning from others. Joey Pins Discipline Conversations. It'll be light and serious. Join us, please. Thank you for consideration.
I was reading your bio. That's really cool, man. I like the fact that you follow all American sports too. I was reading that, and your list is just phenomenal. It's so good.
Well, I follow soccer, and I don't know, it's number 4 or 5 around here, but still, I enjoy it. So, where is I want to start here. I want to food science, obviously, but is food medicine? I don't know who could answer that better.
Totally, it's medicine. Everything. See, our whole society, our right back from when the giant sort of meteor came and smashed into Mexico, and the we were the our ancestors were the little shrews. They started by eating like all the nuts and the seeds and everything, and they developed the metabolism to be able to metabolize those effectively, and that's basically where all mammals or mammalian life on Earth happened, sort of 60 million years ago. And 20 million years ago, we left the trees.
Hmm.
So yes,
Food is medicine.
And I think yeah,
food is
absolutely
medicine.
it is. Absolutely it is. And I think everything you put in your mouth is medicine, and but it's fair to say that some food is not good medicine, and so it's about what you put in your mouth. And I think thousands of years ago in Ayurvedic medicine and traditional Chinese medicine, there's some fantastic things that were done. So, for example, Chinese medicine, they split up the season so that you ate certain foods at certain times of year. Uh, And we've kind of lost that with the onset of pharmaceutical medicine, which is fantastic, by the way. Pharmaceutical medicine does save lives, but we have lost the preventative approach to medicine. So we've sort of ambulance at the bottom of a cliff rather than the preventative approach.
And why is that?
I think it is a disconnection to our food
Mm,
supply, and so I've worked for a long time in the food industry and across the food supply industry, and we don't really understand the seasons anymore. We Most of our food crosses borders, so most of our food is either imported or exported, and we've just lost that basic connection with seasonal food and good quality food. Also, a lot of the food that we eat is highly processed,
mm.
so it's been through manufacturing processes, not whole foods. So I think there's a variety of reasons, but they're probably the main ones.
And somehow that kind of
Yeah,
all
I think
falls
there's
hand.
other.
Sorry, Darcy.
Well, no, I was going to say on adding to that, like think about what's happened in the United States, for example. So in the 1970s, people they'd go to the grocery store, they'd buy, certain food, and they'd buy a lot of vegetables, and it was a much more simpler time. And then all of a sudden came the really, really highly processed foods, and you'd go and you'd buy the Big Gulp at 7-Eleven, and you'd buy this, and it just became a excess. And I remember being a kid, and I remember just seeing they had new stuff at the store, and it just became more and more prevalent. And then you went and you stopped having whole foods, and they started becoming derivatives of corn. So, your Twinkie is a derivative of corn. And I don't know if you could actually classify that as real food, and hopefully I'll never get sued by them. Um, but the reality is, pretty much everything in there is a derivative of corn, from the flour, the corn flour, and the high fructose corn syrup that actually makes the sweet component of it too. So, there's lots of different things in there that actually aren't food, or they're a derivative of the same type of thing that you make look and taste like much different things.
And then we have the birth of kind of food science, right? And that's where we have everything's processed. We have uh, that Impossible Burger was popular for a little while around in the States, and then it just kind of disappeared. I'm not quite sure what happened there, but that was processed meat. You make a lot of great things at your firm. We'll talk about shortly, but um, you know, how are we going to get people back to eating non-processed food? I mean, processed food is so inexpensive, it's so available, but it's high, it's got a lot of calories, it's got a lot of fat, it's very tasty, it's not good for you, and it's abundant. So how are we going to wean people off of that?
It's a really good question because we live in a world where convenience is paramount. We're all in a really big hurry, and so we have to start thinking about convenient food differently. So, uh, a banana or an apple is a
Mm,
convenient food, and so it's thinking about that kind of snacking and shifting our snacking. We 80% of the plants that we eat are actually come from four species: so rice, corn, wheat, or
really?
potatoes. What we need to be doing is really shifting the dial and eating a much larger variety of plant species, and that's really important because plants fundamentally are the carriers of prebiotics. And prebiotics are what our gut bacteria need to survive and thrive, and particularly the good bacteria. So we want to populate our gut with the good bacteria to help stave off chronic disease like diabetes, like heart disease, and so forth. And a lot of the autoimmune diseases. So we need to be eating about 20 to 30 different plant species every
Wow.
week. And that sounds kind of crazy, but it's actually not too bad when you think about different vegetables, different fruits, different seeds, different nuts, even spices and and herbs. And so just trying to really rethink how we think about food and trying not to buy things in packages, but buying those whole type food products and eating that really good variety so that we give ourselves a full variety of prebiotics.
I always hear the term, we've got to eat the rainbow.
Exactly. And there's something really wonderful about when you present a plate on the table with that rainbow. And I think
Mm.
just slow down enough to be able to
Mm.
do that. And I know we're so busy, and it's a but it's actually just a mental shift that if we can actually just go, it only takes 20 minutes to put together that rainbow. It's actually almost just as quick as convenient foods. It's just changing those habits
Mm.
and having that discipline, which you talk about a lot. So really, understand. And I think, I mean, I'm going through it now, is how do you make those small changes? So it's not saying, well, I'm going to suddenly lose 10 kilos in a month. It's saying, well, how do I make small changes so that every meal is going to have fewer processed foods or more vegetables? What does that look like? And I read recently it's about, rather than thinking about what can we stop, it's almost about thinking, what can we
Mm.
add? So if we're thinking about that rainbow and the abundance, then what can we add so there is that real abundance? Um, and that just is a total mental shift.
Yeah, we also hear a
Yeah,
lot
and I think
about shopping in the perimeter of the grocery store, right? Not going inside the aisles. Here in the States, all the vegetables and dairy, et cetera, are all, and the meat are all on the outside. Everything is processed in the inside. Is obesity and overweight? I mean, the numbers in the States are staggering. They're horrible. 75% was the last I heard, overweight and obese. Is it that bad in New Zealand as well? I hope not.
yeah, it is. It's actually it's basically yeah, it's just as bad here too.
Wow.
The interesting thing is I think we have a very unhealthy relationship with food as a species. And I think it's that we need to actually take a little bit of ownership for ourselves. And when you're sitting in front of the television, it's easy to grab a bag of
Mm.
chips or it's easy to grab something and just sort of munch away on them. But I think that we actually ultimately have to change that food dynamic. But I think that the food industry has actually been set up against us,
Mm.
in a lot of ways. That the companies that are marketing, they're marketing to our psychology. There's a large cola company, I dare not say their name, and they show the a lot of time in the winter in Canada, and particularly states as well. I've seen the commercial where they've got like snowmen and they've got people
Mm.
that are out like looking at the northern lights and they're drinking this particular beverage and everyone's happy, rather than the real thing is they're all giving themselves diabetes. And so I think it's that healthy relationship with food that could potentially get us out of it. There's also like we've as scientists have also tried to identify the root causes of some of
Mm.
those, and I think the root causes have been that high fructose corn syrup, the high sugars, that type of thing. So if you, like you said, the periphery, I think if we can do that and stick to that, I think we're safe.
Yeah, and the more we do it, the more the grocery stores will actually change, right? And they'll start offering, more there, and then hopefully it'll drive, the manufacturers to make. You had some great terms, and I watched one of your YouTube discussions where you called it, I think, clean food, where it's just, less ingredients. uh, you know uh, some of those things are just horrible that we see. It's just 20, 25 ingredients. You can't pronounce a lot of them. And obviously they can't be good. Now, Darcy, you have an incredible story. You have an autoimmune issue and you're addressing it in your organization. Would you discuss, please?
Yeah. So a number of years ago, so I think it's actually, so I've got something called sarcoidosis, and I think that, so it's an autoimmune autoinflammatory disease. And basically, inflammation in the body is the smoking gun at the scene of every
Mm.
crime. It is the underlying cause of pretty much every long-term ailment, from heart disease to cancer to diabetes, the whole lot. And so a number of years ago, I was back in Canada, I was back home, and I got really, really sick with a virus. And I believe that sarcoidosis now is similar to like a type of long COVID. Um, anyway, so I yeah, I got really sick. I had trouble breathing. I went to the hospital, and they basically took a lung X-ray and thought at the time that it was lymphoma. Thankfully, it wasn't, but it was sarcoidosis, which is an inflammatory disease. So much like much like obesity, much like diabetes, much like all of those type of diseases, my body was in a hyperinflammatory state. And so they gave me medications, they gave me all sorts of things, but what they didn't do is tell me how to adjust my lifestyle.
Hmm.
They didn't tell me how to eat better. They didn't tell me how to do things better. They're like, take this pill, this pill, this pill. And it was to the point where, it's sort of, I think at the apex, it was 18 different medications.
Wow.
And a lot of those immunosuppressant, and they saved my life. Like uh, things like prednisone are great for reducing inflammation, and they're going to save your life, but you're going to have to make a fundamental change. And so I realized that in learning about the disease, that a fundamental change was one of the most important parts of that whole process. So we've been looking at it from a holistic, I guess, our company, we've been looking at it and disease from a holistic standpoint, realizing that um, as long as it took you to get sick, you're going to have to take time to get out of. And that's been the journey that I've been on. And it's been a harrowing journey in some ways. And in 2019, just before COVID, I suffered a heart attack. And it was a really tumultuous time. And then COVID comes. But in that time, I also made some fundamental changes. My diet's better. Um, I was doing a high intensity interval training clinical trial at the hospital because I told them that I was going to do a triathlon. And in the past, I've done triathlons. I love triathlons. I'm going to start with a sprint distance triathlon, and I tell everyone I'm going to be the fastest person who's not sitting on their couch. And I'm just going to get out there and do it. And if I can do it, everyone can do it. But now comes the hard yards. Now comes the making sure that I don't go for those sodas or go for those other types of beverages, and stay away from the beer and stay away from the pies, and that type of thing. So yeah, so it was a very interesting last 7 years, I guess.
Yeah, and it's you had to like myself, I had to kind of come to this come to Jesus moment before I lost all the weight, right? The doctor said to me,
Yep.
do you want to see your daughter graduate? She was just born, and I had ballooned up to 340 pounds, and I was starting a business. It was horrible. And I had to have that. And then I just, you know, changed the way I do everything. It was, you know, too many times. Another point, of course, we see people go on these yo-yo diets where they lose 20, 30 pounds and they just gain it back. It's got to be a lifestyle change. But I wonder what's going to happen. What needs to happen to the public? And I didn't know it was. I thought it was that bad here in the U.S., but it looks like it's just as bad in New Zealand. I'm going to assume other places as well, that we just have to, you know, uh, better ourselves. And one other point that you made, I get checkups now with my doctor, and they never ask me what I eat. And I tell them, I said,
Mm.
why aren't you asking me what I eat? Isn't that, I mean, that's everything, um, and they just, well, we just kind of treat the symptoms, and but diet is important. This whole time with the pandemic, here in the states, I blame the government. Why didn't the government say, hey, here's a time for us to get healthy, everybody start walking, get out and start walking, get wear a mask and then get back inside. If you can't jog,
Mm.
then walk. Just let's start exercising, let's get healthy. And we had all these people die that had comorbidities of obesity and diabetes that you mentioned, and health, heart issues, and it all really comes down to weight. It's so unfortunate. I don't know what needs to happen. Does the food need to get better? Does the come to Jesus moment need to get better? You offer a lot of A lot of great items in your organization I want to talk about in a moment, but any idea on what needs to happen to people in order for them to get healthier? I mean, there's a golden question. It's worth a lot of money, this answer. So take a deep breath.
Well, may
I
I?
put, can I mean, sorry, Darcy, I just think, um, I'll throw a word out there because I think it's a really important word, and that's
Mm.
shame. Um, and I think we get ourselves into these positions over a long period of time. So we get ourselves overweight and under exercising over 10, 15
Mm.
years. And then we're ashamed, and that shame kind of leads to not sleeping, and it's this vicious circle. And then when you're not sleeping and you're not eating well, if you're not eating well, you don't
Mm.
sleep well, you don't exercise, it's just this completely vicious circle. And if I go back to that abundance that I brought up earlier, it's shifting that mindset out of shame and into abundance and embracing the world and thinking differently. I've just signed up to an app called Noom. I think it's brilliant. It's because it is around managing weight, but it is more focused at the psychology of weight management. And I don't think I couldn't agree more with what you said about government responses to COVID. We just went straight for the
Mm.
masks, straight for the pharmaceutical solution, and instead of saying, well, actually, this is an opportunity to reset the dial. This is an opportunity to say, what foods can I eat that will help my immunity? And there are some beautiful foods out there that are really fantastic for our immunity. And so, just again, it's shifting the conversations, and it's saying we we recognize the shame because we're all on this path. We've all been on this sort of health path of getting overweight and redressing, and it's taking the shame out of the equation and really shifting it to a positive abundance kind of message. What can you do to change
Mm.
things?
Darcy?
So I see a yeah, I see it's the fundamental change in food too. So we've been on this root cause of inflammatory disease because inflammation literally is a smoking gun at the scene of every crime. So that's my tagline, and I say it everywhere.
Mm.
So what we've done recently is we've looked at so when we look at something, we try to look at it from a anthropological sort of lens. So as our ancestors come out of the trees about 20 million years ago onto the savanna, we lose the ability to metabolize uric acid into urea through a uric acid oxidase. Now, why is that important? So, as a species, we commonly had fruits and vegetables in the trees after we stopped eating the leaves. After we came out in the savannas, we had some meat, we had other things in our diet, but fruit in the fall was one of the biggest things that we had. And we'd stuff ourselves with this fruit that was high in fructose, and we'd metabolize this, and it would actually signal our bodies to increase hypertension.
Mm.
So it increase our blood pressure. It would increase blood sugar. It would increase insulin resistance. It would actually signal our bodies to start to slow down. And why is that important? Well, in the middle of winter, you're going to have a hard time finding food. You're going to have a hard time moving around. So you're going to need blood glucose. You're going to need sugar in your blood because your brain runs on blood. The muscles run on blood. Or on sugar. Sorry, your whole body runs on sugar. So
Hmm.
it would signal cardiovascular restriction. It would signal vascular restriction. So it would, as your blood volume fell, you would still be able to pump blood around your body. Your major organs would still have sugar-rich blood, but um, I think we've done ourselves in from a point when we went to a high fructose corn syrup in all our sodas, in all our foods, because that's triggering and signaling that slowdown, and it's actually allowing us to have things like hypertension, which would have been good, if you're in a starvation mode, but it's signaling that. So it's signaling that inflammation, it's signaling those inflammatory pathways. It's just it's this huge repetitive cycle when we should have uh, anything with fructose in it. I from the latest research that I've done, um, basically only in the fall, and that's going to like trigger that slight decline in the winter. But if you're constantly having that and you're constantly trying to, your body is going into the starvation mode, for lack of a better term. um, you're just increasing your inflammation, and it's like a cascade failure in the whole system. So I think the food system, just because we can, doesn't necessarily mean we should.
Mm.
And if you look at the obesity rates from the 1970s compared to now, the only difference really, other than the processing, has been in that high fructose corn syrup and then those corn derivatives. And I think that therein lies the problem,
Yeah.
or a big one.
Yeah. It's funny. I like you see pictures of beaches in the U.S. in the '70s, the '60s, '70s, and then you see beaches now, and the people are just dramatically different. Dramatically different.
Yep.
And when I lost all the weight, I was drinking way too much soda, and I just stopped. And just doing that, I drank water and some green tea, but nothing. Add cold green tea, and just doing that, you will lose a lot of weight very quickly. For high fructose corn is everywhere. I mean, is the American public are we addicted? Are people addicted to sugar?
Yeah, I think so.
In,
And
in everything.
I think it does come down to price as well. You know, it's so cheap.
Mm,
So in New Zealand, to actually eat fresh fruit and vegetables is relatively expensive. So if you're on a really limited income, you're far more likely to go out and buy a soda than you are good, whole
yeah.
quality, nutritious milk, for example. You know, milk has all the calcium and vitamins and nutrients, but it's much more expensive than soda. So this is this kind of again, it's this vicious circle. And I think if we go back to that inflammation, I think it's really important to understand we our whole body is wired to support inflammation, right? So we get attacked by a pathogen or we break something, our body inflames as a really fast way of removing that pathogen or a fast way of repairing. But what we're doing to our body is continually putting us into this state of
Mm.
inflammation. And that's when just everything gets worn out. We just cannot live in this constantly inflamed state. And this is what our diets are doing to us.
Yeah, and we haven't even gotten into organics, where fruit and vegetables organic is even more expensive, and there's the
Yeah.
dirty dozen there that, like strawberries and things like that just kind of collect, that kind of sit in the pesticides and um and so to try to do that as well it's very tough. I remember talking to one person try to do things in season. Of course, we're in our almost our spring here in the States, and whatever is available now, get now. Don't buy things out of season; it'll be more expensive. But again, you can still go to McDonald's and get a complete meal for $4 or $5. That's hard to
Yeah.
compete against that, especially for a mother, a single mother. I don't know, working two jobs and has two, 3 kids. She can, for $20, she could feed her family. It's hard to compete with that.
And in a McDonald's Big Mac, there's over 100 ingredients. I mean, you think that through. It's quite phenomenal. If you made that burger at home, and imagine how many
Mm.
ingredients you might have 20, but and that's with things like the ketchup and so forth. But over a
Wow.
hundred, that's a huge amount of ingredients that you're eating that you don't even know what those ingredients are.
Speaking of McDonald's, I had the great opportunity to speak to the head dietitian, Cindy Goody, at the McDonald's Corporation, and I put it to her. I said, just what we're talking about. I said, just like in the pandemic, we have, some would say that the pharmaceutical companies profited, right, from making these drugs. And of course, they help people, but certainly it benefited them, their stock price, etc. Might people say the same thing for fast food and obesity? Her point was, we have our calories on all our menus. People should be, you know, you should understand a small fry is 250 calories, large fry is 500 calories. I'm going to say a Big Mac, I'm guessing 1,000, 1,200 calories. I'm guessing, I don't know. Um, but I like to keep under 2,000 calories a day if I can. And, the Big Mac just killed 60%, 70% of calories. Tough.
And can you honestly go to McDonald's and have a
Right.
small fries? I never have
Yeah.
been able
Yeah.
to. Like a small fry, they're like that
Yeah.
big. Like who could stop at a small fry? So yeah, and this is the kind of, so her message is it's personal responsibility, right? We put the calories on, it's your choice. And there's an element of, yes, I agree with that, but as you said right at the start, we go to a doctor and we never talk
Right.
about what we eat. Even in medical school, they do very short amounts on nutrition and actually preventative medicine. And my father was actually a medical doctor, and he was a geriatrician, so dealt with elderly. And his view, and the data backed him up. So the statistic was that for every dollar we spend in preventative health, so preventing getting people getting sick, we actually save
Wow.
$6. And so, but yet we don't spend on preventative health. We don't learn about preventative health in med school. We and I guess the really challenging thing about this as well is the people who are nutritionists. They always look wonderful and slim and fit, and they look like they've never had they've never been to McDonald's in their life. They've never been overweight, and so you kind of get this extreme of the super fit and super thin, and then everyone else just going, well, good on them. But actually, how do we, in the terms of this wellness journey, how do we say, well, actually, I have gone wrong. How do I get myself back on track, or how do I shift and change? And that's about education and learning, and perhaps it is about some sort of government level interference around the costs of those really high fructose drinks
Mm.
and takeaways and so forth. So we actually start to reduce the cost of fresh fruit and veggies, and we make it more attractive for people to eat more healthily.
Yeah. Really good point. Darcy, I interrupted.
Yeah, I think no, I think first of all, Anna, that's a great point because that's why I'm doing a triathlon. Because if I can go out and do a triathlon and I've got arthritis and heart issues and lung issues and all that stuff, and I'm overweight, then anybody can do
Yeah.
it. And the other thing is there should be a sugar tax. And the more I've come to that point, there, put a sugar tax, make it expensive, and either put that into back into the medical system, or or something, or subsidize again fruit and veggies, because that'd be brilliant.
Because we have tobacco taxes, we have alcohol
I was about to say
taxes.
that.
Yep,
Why are we letting a whole industry
totally.
away with putting this stuff everywhere, putting sugar in
Yeah,
everything?
there's certainly a tobacco tax. And, here in the States where marijuana is becoming legal in certain states, that there's like 20% tax or something like that, something crazy on that. It's
Yeah,
paying for schools,
yeah,
for
yeah.
states. And, why not put that on sugar? So, you brought up inflammation. And, that's kind of the silent killer. What can we do to help that? I mean, does a healthy diet help lower inflammation as well?
100%. So basically, our bodies, our gut microbiome is fueled by fiber. And the more fiber and the more varieties of fiber that we can get, the better we are. The less fiber we get, the more fat, trans fats, that type of thing, salts and sugars. We're just reducing the overall species in our gut microbiome, and we're putting them under duress. And what happens when something's under duress? It fights back. So I think that our bodies are actually fighting that, and they're staying in that inflammatory state for far too long. And once we do that, things just go sideways.
And I think thinking about that inflammatory states, we talk about the fibers and prebiotics that are in plants, but plants also have a really wide variety of what we call secondary metabolites, which are little compounds that the plant produces that we've actually evolved, and our bacteria have evolved to be able to manage them for our health. And you brought up cannabis before. Cannabis is an example of a plant with secondary metabolites, and those secondary metabolites are the cannabinoids and the terpenes, and some of those products are really, really good for our health. But cannabis is not the only plant that's full of secondary metabolites. Tomatoes have secondary metabolites, berries, and we'll talk about them more when we get to our products. But These are phytochemicals essentially that our body uses to help us fight inflammation. They're really exciting. We're really only just touching on the science around
Really.
them.
Are either of you vegetarians?
No, and in fact, I have farming families, and I'm very pro good quality meat. Eating good quality meat. I am reading a lot of the information around vegetarianism with great interest. And I do believe we're eating probably too much protein in our diets, and we don't need as much protein as some of the sort of diets out there are saying. But I think a small portion of good quality meat is good for our health. But the emphasis should really be on eating lots more plants. So
My father is Italian immigrant, and I would be sent over there as a child, and that Mediterranean diet. People, my friends around here think, well, you eat pasta every day, and I said, actually, no, they have fish and a lot of greens. I mean, small portions of meat,
mm,
and a lot. We eat pasta once a week. They do have wine every meal, but that's a different story. But just a little bit, but still. Um, Small amounts of meat and a lot of greens, a lot of vegetables, and whatever is local during that
yeah,
time. It's so
yeah.
important. Um, it's funny your reaction when I asked if you're vegetarian. You said no, like facetiously. Talk to me more about that. I mean, I by the way, I eat meat perhaps too much.
Oh, I think it's really interesting because I have worked in the agriculture industry and the food industry for a long time, and I'm really aware around the dynamics that's happening around the carbon footprint of meat and so forth. And you brought up Impossible
Mm,
Burger earlier, and so I'm really aware of the attack on the industry, and I think the attack on the industry in some areas is justified. I think we're doing too much indoor feeding of animals, and we need to move to slightly less meat and more meat done, grown on grass and so forth. But I think we're inflating some of the environmental issues. So, for example, if I live in a place called Dunedin, and Dunedin's at the bottom of New Zealand. And if I get on a plane and travel 4 hours to a city called Melbourne, which is in Australia, and so that's a 4 hour plane trip. It's not huge. I will use, and if I come back on that, so that's 8 hours of flying. In that trip, I will use more carbon than if I was vegetarian or vegan for 1 to 2
wow.
years. And so we're getting slightly out
Mm.
of whack how bad meat is in terms of carbon footprint compared with other activities. And really, it's the big fossil fuel sort of things that we really need to shift the dial on. And so I think it is about recognizing, for me, when we eat food in a whole form, our body is usually more able to absorb it. So, for example, when we eat red meat, good quality red meat, we get iron in a form that our body is more able to absorb than if we just have an iron pill. So, if you talk to any woman who's been pregnant, then she'll tell you she probably had to have iron pills, and they made her constipated. They're really quite
Mm.
unpleasant things to take. Whereas if you have iron in a red meat form, then it comes along with the fibers and the other protein and the other molecules that are in meat. And for some reason, and no one's worked it out, but for some reason, we're able to absorb that iron far better than if we had taken an
Mm.
iron pill. So it's again, it goes right back to this whole foods. It's not just the iron; it's everything that goes with the iron that's important to eat good quality meat for our vitamins and minerals.
I think we see that a lot too in like in the juices, right? In fruit juices. Drinking a glass of orange juice is the equivalent of 8 or 9 oranges or something like that. Where, if you had all the fiber and you had everything with it, you wouldn't be able to, consume all of that, and it's much better for you. And those fruit juices can be really harmful, especially in large doses.
And
Yeah,
just
and
chock full of fructose.
Right, full of sugar
yeah,
as well.
yeah. But yeah, try
Yeah.
eating eight
Right.
apples in half an
Yeah,
hour.
that's right. Whereas you could just, throw one back and then continue on, and it just shocks the body and probably causes all kind of inflammation.
Yeah, well, your body's got to deal with that massive load of sugar. And as Darcy said, we are evolutionary primed to actually say, well, I'm going to use this and put it away for
Mm.
winter.
Yep.
I'm looking at this food coming in and thinking, hallelujah, I'm going to add to this so I get through winter because I'm going to be going into a cave in winter and it's going to be cold and my food is going to be limited. We
Yeah,
don't live in that limit anymore.
and by having that apple juice, orange juice, you're actually telling your body that it's going to be winter very soon. So you need to slow your metabolism, and you need to increase your blood pressure, and you need to increase your blood sugar, and you need to increase your insulin resistance because it is coming into winter very soon.
Very interesting. So, you mentioned iron pill. We talk about supplements, and I was looking at your, what you offer. How important is quercetin to our human existence? I've been taking it for a while. I was told to take it. It seems to be very valuable.
Well, quercetin is actually a zinc ionophore. So quercetin is actually going to help to get zinc into your
Hmm.
system. And zinc is really important because that actually helps build your immunity. So that's what it does. It's also just chock full of other flavonoids and other sort of phytochemicals. And so it actually is a really interesting target, and it's a really interesting product because it actually interacts in a lot of different ways inside your body. So not only does it help to bring zinc into the cells, but it actually has been seen to be quite antiviral and antimicrobial as well.
Where is it naturally found?
And it's
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna.
so yeah. So I mean, it's a really interesting compound because you do have to have quercetin with other compounds. So, like we were talking about the iron, it's better, if you have it in that whole form. So with quercetin, it needs to be taken, or you need to have it with lipids. So you need to have quercetin after a meal so that your body is more likely to
Hmm.
absorb it. And so there are things that you need to do with quercetin if you have it in a supplement form so that your body is able to absorb it. And the products that we develop, we make sure we have some of those compounds in there that helps your body absorb it. In terms of how we find it in real life, so or real life and out in the natural world, so the quercetin we use is from a flower bud, a Japonica sephora flower bud, but you can also find quercetin in food like capers and red onion. So particularly the red onion skin. So yeah, so it is in other foods as well, and in a natural form.
I noticed also you have some honey that I've never heard of. Talk to me about local honey. I mean, everybody talks about how it's just good just for, to fend off some allergies that you may have that bring up in your environment. But honey isn't it the only food on our planet that'll last forever?
Yeah, it's really antimicrobial, honey. So yeah, it doesn't go off. It sort of crystallizes, but it doesn't actually go off. And so the honey we use in one of our products is called New Zealand Manuka honey, and that has what we call a UMF, which is an ultra or a unique Manuka factor, which is antimicrobial and antiviral in itself. And so it's very very popular in Asia as a medicinal honey. But we also use local native honeys like Arata honey, which is a beautiful mellow flavour and has similar antimicrobial properties as well. So honey is a really, really interesting product, and particularly for things like oral health, but also wound health. So, as we move into this world of antibiotic resistance, we'll be looking to things like honey to introduce other ways of clearing bacteria.
Fascinating. So you're saying if you have a wound, you could put honey on it?
Yeah, although it's pretty
Yeah,
sticky.
but
So,
that's all right.
and the best, some of the companies in New Zealand are now embedding it in wound dressings and so forth. I know Darcy's done quite a bit of wound care with honey, haven't you, Darcy?
I have. I was injured quite seriously a number of years ago, 25 years ago in Canada, and they actually started using Manuka wound dressings on me rather than the. So I was burned as well, and they used Flamazine, which is a silver cream, but they also used a lot of Manuka honey as well, and that helped to keep out the infections. So I was wrapped in bandages for probably 2 years total time.
Oh my goodness.
Mm.
I've never.
Yeah, it was one of those times that you're grateful for Manuka honey, and it was actually the first time I was introduced to New Zealand, and it's pretty much a honey that's only local to New Zealand. And it's actually a really interesting product. It's got something called methylgloxal, which is quite antimicrobial as well as antiviral. But it's actually really good for wound dressings and stuff like that. So there are companies now that are making wound gauzes or bandages basically out of that Manuka honey.
Wow. And wow, I don't know what to say to that. I mean, that's incredible. It's 100% natural. It's from the local. I remember for a while we were hearing things about bees were endangered here in the States. I don't know where that went off. We don't hear about it anymore. But it's amazing what just comes naturally. It just helps the human body.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
and bees are actually still threatened. They are, they suffer from colony collapse. They suffer from pesticides. They suffer from stressed out little immune systems and stuff like that, and hauling them all over the country. So they still are in that very same position. But yes, it is amazing the wound healing properties and what comes out of honey in some regards, and the fact that it can help with local allergies and such. And Anna, you go ahead on that.
I was just going to add our modern agricultural systems certainly don't help bee health. And again, I know the almond industry in the US was quite troubled. So that you need bees for pollinating the almond trees, right? But then if they're stuck with one food source, then the bees themselves can get very sick and die. So it's like moving. It's everything we're doing. We need biodiversity. So we need to eat biodiversity, but our bees also need to have access to biodiversity to thrive, and lower chemical inputs. So biodiversity, lower chemical inputs. It's probably a theme throughout our lives and those around us, or our whole ecosystem.
Amazing. And then some of your other products focus on lung health as well. I was interested to find out that one of our lungs are larger than the other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so
So
our products basically, that's when I was diagnosed with sarcoidosis, and I was sitting on that hospital gurney waiting to go in and get little sections taken out of my lungs, so they're going to biopsy them. Um, Basically, at that point, I thought, we're going to do something different here, and we're going to learn all about this if I survive. And yeah, so we went down that road, and then I met Anna, and I started talking to Anna, and she's a plant biologist. So honestly, the 15-minute conversation turned into about a 2.5, 3 year business partnership kind of thing now. And the so we went down that lung health path because our lungs are actually a really important part of our body, and if we're not getting oxygen, we're in trouble. If we're stopping that diffuse oxygen, so the areas in our lungs which actually allow that oxygen to get into our bloodstream or get that gas out, so that gas exchange surface is really important. And things like PM 2.5 particles, so this really small pollution, rubber from tires as the cars are driving down the road are spitting up this pollution, cigarette smoke, exhaust from internal combustion engines, dust from the atmosphere, all sorts of things basically get into our lungs, and they stop our lungs being able to fully metabolize that. So some of our products, or for example, the boysenberry and black currant, activate these little cells, or these little immune cells. They're M2 fibrolytic macrophages. And these little things go in there and they nibble away at this inflammation, and they actually clean out our lungs of this inappropriate inflammation, and it actually helps us diffuse oxygen better. It helps us to breathe better. And that's scientifically proven. And when we're able to breathe better, we're just able to do everything better. We get better oxygenation. I went from the reason, so the pink doors behind me, we went to pink for our products, basically. Like, for example, that is because that's like lung pink. So I went from green to not being able to greenish gray to not being able to um, metabolize oxygen effectively to now I'm mouse pink. So, the you just can't understate or overstate how important that is, and that's why it was one of our first targets.
Do lungs inflame as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And that inflammatory process affects lungs just like it affects anywhere else. And when you have inflamed lungs, when they're under a pathogenic attack or when they're under just environmental stress, you need to reduce that inflammation. You need to make your lungs work as good as they possibly can work, because that's really the coal face. And that is where that gas exchange happens, and where we're able to metabolize that oxygen. Once that system is hurt, we start to become very hurt as well.
And if you think about that inflammation process, if you think about if you get a virus or a cold, or you think about a smoker, a long-term smoker, so what's happening is those bronchial tubes are inflamed, the lung air sacs are inflamed, and so there's a constriction happening. It fills up with mucus. You're less able to get that air flow through those tubes, and so you're less able to breathe. And again, it's this ongoing inflammation path that our body is supposed to inflame for a short amount of time, and then we move on and we get better. But what we're doing is constantly exposing ourselves to pollution or to cigarette smoke, and so we're constantly triggering that inflammation response, which leads to scarring and real problems. And I guess the hope at the end of the tunnel, and this for me is really exciting. My brother's a cancer geneticist in the UK, and he heads up the Sanger Cancer Genomics Institute. And he did some really groundbreaking work looking at, first of all, how many cigarettes it took to mutate DNA. And then they did some follow-up work which showed that once someone actually stops smoking, then there's these hidden cells, and they liken them to like these cells hiding in a bunker that somehow had escaped the cigarette pollution and smoke. And once you stop, slamming yourself with this cigarette smoke, then these little bunker cells almost come out of hiding and start to regenerate. And so with someone who gives up smoking, yes, they've done some damage, but what's really exciting is that these cells can start regenerating and our lung health can start to build back up again. It may not reach what it was before you started smoking, but I think, again, I always like to think there's hope. And if you can somehow identify what's causing the problem, take that out of the equation, start having good, healthy food and good, healthy plants and so forth, and allow those types of cells to regenerate, then your lungs can improve and function. And Darcy's lungs have improved enormously. He's now able to not take steroids. So these are, huge things that he's been able to do just by slowly correcting this path. And it doesn't happen overnight. But
No.
It's quite exciting. I think the body's ability to repair is really quite exciting.
Yeah, I think that's actually really important too. Like the see, so as long as it took you to get into the trouble, it's going to take you time to get out. And so our products are designed to introduce that stopgap. They're going to allow you to have enough time to change your life. They're going to allow you to, yeah, but you're going to have to make that fundamental change because that's super important. And I don't think people realize just how much they're going to have to change. And when you went from 340 pounds to 195 pounds or whatever you are now, that was a fundamental paradigm shift in your way of thinking. And you basically took your own responsibility for your own life and realized that you were going to have to make this fundamental shift. So sometimes you need help to make that fundamental shift. Sometimes your lungs are just damaged. Sometimes you've got COPD or asthma or something else, and you're just going to have to help mitigate that, which is going to allow you to get up and get active. It's going to allow you to get active, and you're going to have to change your diet, and you're going to have to stop eating those inflammatory foods.
Hmm.
but it's a whole paradigm shift.
Yeah, it certainly is. You also work on pulse and heart restoration. I mean, the heart isn't heart disease the number 2 killer or number 1 killer here in the States?
Yeah, and the reality is when you also have a heart attack, that pulls things into perspective very quickly.
Mm,
So, that again, that is a come to Jesus moment.
yeah.
As you said, you had one, and that was so. Not only did the lung damage start with me, but it was that heart damage. I was like, that was the come to Jesus. All right, are you going to be here and you're going to watch your kids graduate, or are you going to die when you're 95? Well, I choose 95. Thank you very
Mm,
much, and I will do whatever it takes to get us there. And so, thankfully, we've got some really good science around our heart product. We've got some really good science around our brain product, around our lung product. And what we're trying to do is deliver sort of a whole body. Um, I guess if you have
Package, yeah.
problems with it, yeah, a package. So we've got a gut health one that's coming that's going to help introduce certain types of fibers in a very unique way. Um, so that's basically where we start, but then the rest of it is up to us. So we're just introducing that stopgap. We're going to help stop that viral infection. We're going to help stop that bacterial infection. We're going to, you know, help with, for example, symptoms of long COVID or in my case, sarcoidosis, but the rest is up to you. You got to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and just start going and
You know,
move.
I got a message this morning, and I think this sort of highlighted for me the value of what we're trying to do. I got a message from a mum of a girl this morning, and she said her girl keeps has been coughing at night, so hasn't been able to sleep. She's been taking Exhale, our lung formulation, which reduces the inflammation as well as the phlegm in the lungs, and now she's not waking up coughing, so she's getting a full sleep, and now she's feeling like she's able to go out and exercise and things because she's got better lung capacity, but also mentally she's in a much better place because she's not waking up
mm.
coughing half the night. And I thought, wow, that's gold, because if that shift can help her get on a path to better exercise and everything else, then and feeling better about herself, then you really can change lives, and that's really what we're about. We really want to make a difference in what we do.
Yeah, you mentioned you have other products for immunity and mental health. I mean, how does mental health play into this? I mean, that's another huge issue. Certainly here in the States, we're starting to talk about it a little bit more. We have some actors and some athletes, right, that have come out and said that they suffer from it. Where the discussion is starting to happen a little bit more. But how do you address it with nature like that? It's very interesting.
Well, I think our modern lifestyles are such that we just don't have downtime.
Mm.
I think that mentally, everything is really super high pressure, and that high pressure is it's really detrimental to mental health. And you spoke
I think,
about
Darcy,
run.
it might be worth. Yeah, so I'm just thinking, maybe we're worth explaining that stress response and really what happens in our bodies when we react to
Mm.
stresses.
Yeah, and I was going to say with Joey, for example, running a company, and when you increased in weight, I would think that that would be a lot to do with stress and probably an unhealthy relationship with food, and I too have that unhealthy relationship with food, and that when you have that stress, it increases that fight or flight response. It increases the cortisol, the stuff that's going to allow you to be able to run away from that saber-toothed
Hmm.
tiger. Um, but the problem is if you're constantly trying to run away from a saber-toothed tiger, that cortisol response is just like acid. So basically, it is a really tough thing. And back to food, I think that is where a lot of people it's that comfort food, and so it's that relationship value with food when perhaps we could um, do other things. So I think it's developing that um, healthy relationship. But until then, we've got that brain health product, which actually helps to reduce that stress response and reduce that cortisol response, and just make us a little bit happier, and give us that sort of feeling of wellness. And it's that modern lifestyle that we've got ourselves into, that it's just it's you know you think, when you're really busy, I've only got like 40 more years of this kind of thing.
Mm.
And it's that sense of hopelessness, where you're just that hamster running on that hamster wheel, and that stress, and the you can never make enough money, and you're not good enough, and you're not fast enough, you're not skinny enough, and you're not, like, the whole, it just turns into the whole thing. And then you add the financial pressures of business, and you just add a whole bunch of other things to it, and it's just like a recipe for disaster. And then you're stuffing your face with saturated fat, salt, and sodas, fructose. And that's pretty much, again, the I call it now, flippantly, forgive me, the American dream.
Mm.
And that's sort of where it's come to, and that's like I think a real unhealthy place to come to.
Yeah, and I think that's a good segue onto, people ask me all the time, how did you lose the weight? Like there's some secret way, like, I just tied my left shoe first or something, something silly and arbitrary. And, it's just really, the one answer I always have to give is discipline. I just focused and, I still feel, and that was, 15 years ago, that there's still a 340-pound person inside of me trying to get out. And you have to continually, there's just, cookies are delicious, right? And so is pizza. And so, so I try to, I try to do the 80-20 rule, right? Where 80% of the time I'm disciplined, I keep it under 2,000 calories. I try to watch, and then some other times I don't, and I just move on. But um, I try to live that way, and that's the discipline that I use. I'm certainly not perfect, but that's the way I cope with it. I wonder how discipline plays a role in both of your lives.
No,
Well,
that's an interesting one. I think I hear you around the calorie thing. I think it's really interesting because, as I said earlier, I've signed up to Noom, and I haven't signed up to Noom to do a 3 month program. I've said I've signed up for a full year where I'm going to track my calories and try and keep them under a certain amount. And so part of that is that discipline of doing that on a daily
Mm,
basis. So I'm on that journey now, and I'll check in a year's time and tell you how I
mm,
went. But I think, you know, for me, there's been things like I've dropped alcohol pretty much, apart from occasional. There's just things that I've done that I've slowly reduced. I've got dogs, so I make sure I walk or run every day, and those are the things that you just have to build into and find time. But I'm not, I'm not perfect. I've got three teenagers, a business, a busy life, and things go to custard. But I think thinking about that discipline, it's recognizing that you're going to fall off the wagon. There's going to be times where it all goes to pieces and you devour a whole pizza or whatever it is that's your thing. But it's about getting up the next day and saying, that's not going to take me off the train track. I'm going to get back on that track and I'm going to keep going. And I think for me, that's signing up to Noom for a year. A year is a big
mm.
commitment to write every calorie I eat, right? But that's what I've said. It's a year commitment. It's not a 2 or 3 month fix. So we'll see how I go.
Good luck.
and as for devouring a whole pizza, I have no comment on that matter. Um, but the actually, so what I did is I got myself an Apple Watch, not only to monitor my heart function, but at the same time to set my targets. And I always hit my targets. So, um, in some ways, I have mine like a steel trap, and I'm capable of doing, you know, great and wonderful things. And then I walk by and I see a dark beer and a pie in a window, and I just have a hard time walking by that. So, my basic goal was to simply just have a shift and shift slowly. And once I'm able to shift slowly, then I can just maintain that. And no sodas, no, limit it to 1 or 2 beer a month, and add more fiber and just exercise. And that's what I'm going to do. And I'm going to do a triathlon. So we'll send you some photos of the triathlon. I'll be the fattest, slowest, oldest guy in the triathlon, but I'll be faster than everyone on the couch.
Yeah, I've done a few triathlons. They're fun. I ended up loving the swim, tolerating the bike, and hating the run. I don't know which order you follow in. That's how I.
Yeah. So years ago, I actually did a lot of
Oh,
triathlons, and so I used to do them. Yeah. So I was actually training to do a Ironman, and then I was actually going to go the next week, and I broke my ankle, and then I got back into it within about a year, and then I rebroke it again. So because I just pushed too hard, but yeah, so I love the triathlon, and you're right, the swim is amazing, the bike is just incredible, and then oh my god, why do you have a run at the end of it?
yeah, yeah.
And it's at the end, right? So it just
I
is a
guess.
killer. I was just thinking another thing that I think Darcy brought up before that's really important is that downtime. And the downtime doesn't have to be, I think we've got really focused on things like meditation and yoga. But for me, downtime is actually cooking a beautiful meal for my family. So I really love being in the kitchen with some music. My husband loves gardening. So that downtime can actually be quite
Mm,
active or quite, but it's something that's away from a screen. It's not adrenaline
mm.
producing. It's just calm, enjoyable time. So finding out what, looking at your life and thinking, when do I feel really calm and just, in the zone? And for me, it's while I'm cooking. For someone else, it's while they're walking or even running. For some people, heaven forbid. But what puts you in that really nice, just great, just mellow kind of feeling.
Yeah, I love to cook too. I've never experienced that runner's high people talk about. I think it's a fallacy. I don't know.
I did
Did you?
once. I did once. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Never again, but just once when I was training for a half marathon years ago, and I think this is it. I was quite excited. Never came back again.
Well, you got to make one of those. Make a pill that does that. Brings on
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think though, when I look back on when I did get that runner's high, I just got up this massive, massive hill.
uh,
And so I think we call it type 2 fun. You've actually got to go through pain to get that
mm,
real feeling of a high. And if you talk to mountaineers, this is what they talk about as this type 2 fun, and that's the runner's high, I think, because you don't get a runner's high at the start of
right.
the run. Often it's, when you're an hour into the run and you're like, wow, I feel amazing. But it's usually because you've been through
Mm-mm.
pain.
Yeah, I think you have something there. I really appreciate both of your time today, Anna and Darcy. What a pleasure. I don't know what it's going to take. I know excellent products like yours will help, but that shift, the general shift of just trying to get healthy and nothing temporary. Like when I get asked what I did, it's like they want some temporary answer, and no, it's a shift, it's a change. You just have to change, and even though you drive down the road and you see all those inexpensive, high caloric food, you have to just turn it around and try to eat the rainbow and shop around the perimeter of the grocery store and just some of these subtle things. I find, if I want cookies, I just end up drinking a lot of water, just replacing it. And then I'm not hungry anymore. There's just certain things every once in a while I'll still do it. Don't because then you'll get resentment and then you'll start, abusing yourself.
Yeah.
But, just try to substitute is what I find. But I really appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank
Really, really cool.
Yeah, and thanks for that substitution. So I'm going to use that, and also
Carrots.
like,
Carrots.
but good for you for also like pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. So you're living proof that it can be done, and it's never the skinny person; it's the fat person who has become skinny. That's the person you listen
Yeah.
to because that's the person who understands. That's the person who truly gets it.
Yeah. And just like
So thank you.
Thank you for the compliment. By the way, one day I'll work on accepting a compliment. I'm still working on it, but thank you. But just like you said, I'll be the best one who finishes who's not on the couch. It's the same thing. I've been an athlete all my life, but just I wasn't that great. I just loved it. Anybody can do it. This idea that I can't do it. we play golf over here and somebody walks onto the course and he's overweight and he walks with us. I said, just keep walking. But I love Dr. Pepper.
Yep.
How many Dr. Peppers do you drink a day? Oh, about 10. Just drink one. Just drink one and, and,
Yeah.
and have 9 glasses of water. Just, I'm not saying cut it out. Just slow it down a little bit. I'm going to hold you accountable. Next time I see you, I'm going to ask you. That's another, try to have some, there's just certain things just with anything, you just have to, I mean, it's your health for goodness sakes. Once you have, like I said, my daughter was born, and even, I've got a good healthcare provider. Last year, I had gained just about 10, 15 pounds, and I went for a checkup, and I weighed myself, and she says to me, "Hey, Joe, did your Peloton break?" My bike. So she's very, I'm from the Northeast. She's very sarcastic, and okay, all right, I get it. That's your way of telling me. All right. So, by the way, I started intermittent fasting a year ago. We didn't talk about that, where I don't need 3 meals a day. I don't need it. I can stop eating at
No.
5 or 6, and I get hungry at night. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm not hungry anymore. Your body's tricking you. It's thinking you're not going to get any food, and it's tricking you. And you go to sleep and you wake up just fine. We didn't talk about intermittent fasting. I wonder how
Totally.
you
Yeah.
feel about that.
Really, really interesting, and I'm doing it at the moment actually. So the really interesting science around that is around what happens in your gut health and your
Mm,
bacteria around intermittent fasting, and how it promotes some species of the good
right.
bacteria. So it is absolutely fascinating, and I think we're just starting to understand it. And uh, but I think what's really important too here is on this Noom thing that I'm doing is I'm discovering I like to eat in the evening. I'm actually quite fine not eating in the
Ah,
morning. And so I fit my intermittent fasting so I get a really good meal at night because then I feel
mm,
satisfied. So I'm kind of the opposite of you. So I hate the thought of finishing. I really like sitting
ah.
down to a good square meal at night and having, whereas some people, yeah, they'll stop eating after 5 or something. And I'm like, wow, how do you do that? But I can easily not eat, now from 8 at night through to
Mm,
midday or 1 the next day. That's no problem for me. So it's working out how it works for you and your psychological
right.
cycle as well as your physical cycle. Yeah.
Yeah, in Europe they eat late too.
Our bodies were our bodies were also meant to
They
fast.
are, right?
We were meant to have times when we weren't meant to have food.
Mm,
That's why we can live for so long without it.
yeah. Yeah. Another tip, by the way, I know we're getting off tangent as far as exercise. I just do a little running. I play a little tennis. We have something around here called pickleball, which is I always sleep better after my body is a little tired. My body's a little tired from exercise. I sleep so well that night. Your body rewards you. It wants you to sleep and regenerate. And uh, my goodness, I want people to get healthy. Just all three of us do, and I want to do
Yeah.
whatever we can. We'll talk about it some more, and let's get people healthy again. You talked about long term COVID. You mentioned that a couple times, Darcy. It's depressing. I hate the idea of it. Vitamin D was another thing we never were told to take vitamin D. Just getting out into the sun helps so many problems with that
Yep.
as well.
Yep. But even if you have long COVID, you can still recover.
Mm,
You can still keep going and never ever give up. Not
that's
ever. Don't ever give up. Just keep going and don't stop.
And and little goals. So one day you're not able to leave the house. Well, okay, so say next day I'm going to walk to the lamppost
that's
and back. It might be 100, 200 meters, but it's getting you out under the sunlight. And so it's just setting those little goals and just rewarding yourself when you achieve them. I think it's that turning that mindset into that feeling of abundance and feeling of I can do this but I'm not going to do it all in a week. It's going to take me time to rebuild. And so when you're setting goals, set them for a year. Don't set
mm,
I'm going to in 3 months I'm going to lose 5 kg or I'm going to run a 5K run in 3 months. Actually say over the next year this is where I want to be.
yeah.
Amen.
It's very true. And there's that,
Yep.
my daughters always talk about, the FOMO, right? The fear of missing out. People are eating fast food and they're doing this and I'm not. And but generally they're not healthy. And
No.
try to create your own fear of missing out and being healthy would be a great notion.
Yeah, fear of missing out on triathlons
That's right. That's right. And
or playing
that's
tennis.
right. And ice water and
Yes.
eating.
Smoke
That's
too
right.
fun.
And eating the rainbow. FOMO eating the rainbow.
yeah.
That's right.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah.
Just kind of reverse it, Darcy and Anna, thank you so much for your time today. Such a great pleasure. I hope one day we can all meet and have some ice water together.
That'd be fantastic.
Thanks for
It was a
chatting.
great
It was
pleasure.
great to
Good
talk
luck
to
in the triathlon, and you be well, everybody.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And
you. So,
also send us your address and we'll send you some of our product, please.
Very good. I'll do that. I'll do that and make sure of that. Thanks again. You have a great day. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening and or viewing Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations. Please share this episode with one or two of your friends who you think may benefit from the episode. Our website, www.joeypins.com. There you'll find lots of resources and you could join our mailing list. Please follow us on all our social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Podcast information, the video version of our podcast is on YouTube. Please subscribe. Audio is on all major podcasting platforms. Please follow them. And if you like it, please consider giving 5-star rating. Would really appreciate that. Would you like to financially support the podcast? You can go to our Patreon site. Consider $5, $10, or $20 a month. There's all kind of plans that we have there. There's like a one-time payment. What is this podcast episode worth to you? $25, $50, $100, $500, $1,000, $5,000. You be the judge. You can go to our PayPal account to do that as well. Thank you again for listening or watching Joey Pin's Discipline Conversations.